If you're a driven, active person who wants to reach and pursue a higher quality life with some ambition, then guess what? This podcast is for you. This is the Driven Athlete Podcast. What's up, y'all? It's your man, Dr. Kyle. Welcome back to the Driven Athlete Podcast. We got a really cool special guest with us, Nolan Greenwald. She's a private Pilates instructor, Pilates enthusiast, super knowledgeable with what she does. So I appreciate you coming on, sharing some of your knowledge.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be on your podcast because I look up to you as a fitness professional. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors in the fitness industry, and I feel like you're one of those people out there who really stick to the science. So I really appreciate that.
I appreciate that. No, thank you. That's cool. And of course, we enjoy helping people and getting legit results for people,
For sure.
And I think the proof's in the pudding, ultimately, But anyway, so tell us about what you're doing. So where you're at and what you do for people.
Sure. So let me start at the beginning. I was a competitive equestrian growing up. So I rode for 14 years, traveled the country, and actually I spent 3 months of the year not too far from where we are today in Wellington at the Winter Equestrian Festival.
I mean, that's like the hub.
Yes.
Wellington?
100%. And it's unlike anything else. I loved it, and I loved it while I did it. I stopped when I went to college, but, as I got older, I started noticing some of the negative things that came along with horseback riding. I had a lot of joint strain. My low back was always hurting. I was one of those people that would do those obnoxious neck cracks that other people around me would just cringe. My mom would actually tell me, you have to stop doing that. It scares people. So, that's kind of how I started my fitness journey. I really wanted to not cure, but certainly pay attention to what was happening and improve those symptoms.
Yeah.
So I found Pilates. It was a low impact form of exercising that I was really driven and attracted to. So I did Pilates over a number of years, and I was fortunate to have really great instruction from the beginning. I always had, one-on-ones with instructors, and just very fortunate to have learned from some of the best people out there.
And where was that at?
So I lived in Philadelphia originally. So my training started there. I would go to this woman's house on the main line of Philadelphia, and she just actually sort of similar to what I'm doing right now. She had a private studio. She'd only do privates with people. And so I was fortunate to have very detailed instruction from the beginning. So, fast forward, I worked in politics for a while after college, and at a similar time, I met my husband. We were living in New York for a little while, and so eventually we moved down here, little before COVID, and so we came down here, and I was really kind of craving the sort of instruction that I got up north.
Yeah.
So I tried all the studios, and sort of at the same time, I wasn't really feeling fulfilled by my job in politics. So I eventually quit, and my husband was very supportive, and he said, you should really take some time to figure out what you want to do next. And I've always been a podcast listener, so I was listening to all of these podcasts that kind of revolved around wellness, functional medicine, because that's really where my passion was.
What podcasts?
So Dr. Mark Hyman's podcast, he was the main one, but
Cool.
Rupa Health and David Sinclair and all these kind of longevity and anti-aging people. I was always fascinated by that.
Yeah. I think that's the direction healthcare is going.
For sure.
Versus just allopathic meds,
Yeah.
There's just so much consequences over a long period of time of taking meds, or just being take these meds forever, problem solved. Hypothyroidism, take Synthroid, take this medication forever. It's like, there's got to be a different way.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And well, I know we're getting to that later, so I'm gonna put a pin in that and save that. But
Yeah.
I just really wanted to find a way that I could get involved in this sort of wellness industry. And the most logical way for me was I had done Pilates for a long time. There's a lot of studies that show that Pilates is very helpful from a physical therapy perspective.
For sure.
And so I decided to get my certification. I did the Balanced Body certification, which is one of the nationally accredited ones. I've always been like a very academically rigorous person, so it was important for me to carry that over into whatever certification I did, which is why I chose Balanced Body. I did my certification specifically through Boston Body, which is a studio in Boston. My husband's from there, so we would already kind of go back and forth, and I tried to time my visits there with some of the classes that they were doing. I did a lot of my observation hours there, and it was a long experience. You need 500 hours. It's not a joke.
Yeah, that's not.
And
that's not a short time.
No. So Zaina Gold and Liv Nurmi are the people who see that through. And I really liked how they sort of streamlined everything and made the process pretty, I mean, it's overwhelming, but they do a really good job of making it accessible. So I completed that. And so I started teaching at other studios, and my husband and I ended up moving to a house in West Palm Beach where we had a guest house. So that's when I decided to open my own studio. I outfitted my guest house as a Pilates studio, and that's when my business, House of Pilates, was born.
Cool. So House of Pilates.
House of Pilates.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
And that's good.
I figured that was a logical name. So, and I also, and I'm sure we'll get to this later, I wanted to create an environment that I had always kind of craved as a student, which was like a very tranquil, mindful environment. And what else kind of brings that about besides being in your own house?
Yeah, for sure. 100%. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask again, I didn't know. So you were involved with politics previously.
Yeah.
What capacity? Like with campaign managing or pursuing your own politic career?
No, not my own career in politics.
Like Senator Nolan going for Pennsylvania?
No, I was the person behind the scenes. So I worked a lot on grassroots fundraising. So I'm sure at some point you've gotten one of the numerous political text messages or emails or been targeted by one of the Facebook or Instagram ads.
Text back to 3333 from donate today.
Exactly. Yeah. So that was what we did. We did a lot of the messaging control for the grassroots.
Interesting.
And so, listen, it was great, but I really wanted to do something that I felt like was making people's lives better, more people were happy. Yeah. And I always appreciated the strategic nature of politics. I studied political science and communications in college, but on a day-to-day, I just wasn't happy doing it.
Yeah. I mean, it could be cool, like getting behind something that you feel like you believe in, but I always felt, with one-on-one engagement, you get pretty impactful, noticeable impact for people.
For sure.
And I know for Pilates, there's definitely a blend and a good marriage between physical therapy and Pilates. A lot of my colleagues do a lot of Pilates stuff in their practice.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a lot of carryover.
Yeah.
All right. So you're located in West Palm Beach.
Yes.
You have your House of Pilates is located in your guest house.
Yeah.
And you only do privates.
Yep. I only do privates.
What's like your wheelhouse of clientele? Like what's your favorite type of people to work with?
I don't really have a favorite. I will say that the one kind of commonality between all my clients, I train men, women, old, young. I think the thing that kind of weaves them together, though, is that they're all very intentional about how they want to work out. And I admit to people, I'm not the trainer for you if you just want the experience of going to a class with your friends and getting a good sweat. That's not me. That's not me as a person. I'm naturally an introvert. So, if people ask me if I'll do classes or whatnot, it's just, I say, listen, I'm not the person for you. So I think what all my clients kind of have in common is they really want the granular details. Like they want me to come up and shift their hips a centimeter to the right, which makes all the difference sometimes. And they also really want a mindful, private setting, which I think coming down here, I tried a lot of studios and there are great instructors everywhere. I just didn't love the environment. I didn't love going and thinking, okay, who am I going to see today? So I really wanted to create that kind of private, mindful setting where the client and I can just be focused on one another. And so I think my preferred clientele really appreciates that sort of setting.
Calm, relaxed, mindful setting.
Yeah.
Versus chaotic, robust, lots of traffic.
Yeah, I think they're very intentional about, okay, when I work out, I want to get the best workout possible without injury. They're not necessarily people that are, harder is better. They just really, they want something that works for their body. A lot of times the clients that I see have gotten injured going to other places. So they've come to the conclusion that they need a more detailed approach through the other sort of approach failing.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean, that for sure. And that's oftentimes that's who we see.
Right.
And then we send them back to people like you, It's like, let's get you feeling better, fix some stuff, get you confident again, and then shift them out. So tell us about like your understanding of Pilates.
Yeah.
Like the approach, philosophy. What is Pilates?
So Pilates was created back in the early 1900s by somebody named Joseph Pilates. Originally, though,
did not know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So originally, he called it controlology. It's kind of a mouthful, but it sort of speaks to the ethos of Pilates, which is it's very controlled, it's very detailed, and each move has a purpose. So he was actually sort of a sickly kid. He had a lot of problems. And so he was determined to overcome those problems. So he got into bodybuilding. He boxed for a little bit. He was into a bunch of different things. And he created this method as sort of a culmination of everything that he had studied back then. So I think in the 1920s, he and his wife emigrated to America, and he began teaching out of a ballet studio. So he trained a lot of dancers, a lot of gymnasts, and that's why I think Pilates has gotten that reputation for creating like long, lean physiques because it was mostly used by dancers. But I think Pilates has sort of come to be known as a method that improves your core strength while working on your mobility. Now, today we have two separate camps. So we have more of the traditional camp, or we call classical. So when Joseph Pilates came up with his original repertoire, there was a sequence of moves. So each one was supposed to be done after another. So that's more classical. I verge more towards the contemporary, which is you take those moves, you don't necessarily do them in the same sequence every time, noting that some people have different injuries and they maybe can't do a certain move. And they've adapted some of the moves to science that has obviously sort of come about since the 1920s.
Gotcha. Cool. Yeah. So what would you say, what would you want to convey to people about like, oh, what is House of Pilates? What's your approach, your philosophy?
Yep. So as we kind of discussed before, only privates because I really want to zone in with each client that I have. No two session that I teach is the same. Mm-hmm. Again, somebody who values kind of privacy, mindfulness. And then the third, I think, that maybe separates me is I really try to surround myself with mentors that know more than I do. Mm-hmm. It's very important for me to stay updated with the science and constantly learning. So When I moved to Florida, I had the honor of meeting somebody who I do consider a mentor, and now one of my best friends, Chanel Lundahl, who is a chiropractor by trade, but she also has a master's in sports rehab. And she was telling me she was a little skeptical of Pilates because she would say, listen, I've heard it's great, but everybody I see who does Pilates has a very tight neck. They're always kind of curled forward. And oftentimes they're like hypermobile. So I kind of started to think about that. And she had recommended some studies to me by like Craig Liebenson and Stuart McGill, and who are very renowned physical therapists, biomechanics. And I started reading them, and I started reading kind of the theories on loaded flexion and rotation. And, I realized that that's what a lot of Pilates is. It's a lot of ab curls. It's a lot of curling forward, which does, and I will hear it from, clients that I would see causes some, neck strain. And I noticed that their kind of theory of core bracing it wasn't really reflected in a lot of the Pilates that exists. I think, a really common cue that you'll hear in a class is like pull your belly button to your spine, which is more like sucking in, which is not, as like you want to encourage diaphragmatic breath. So it doesn't really allow you to fully brace your core and use it correctly. So using that and knowing that knowledge, I took that and I adapted some of the moves from the traditional repertoire to reflect moves that encourage more of that core bracing. So like a neutral spine, like dead bugs, and more planks, hinging instead of necessarily curling, like stir the pot kind of moves, and like bird dogs and things like that. And so I did that in my own training, and I saw a huge difference, because although Pilates had gotten me to a certain point, I did still notice that like my neck was a little tight from time to time. And moves like, roll ups in Pilates, for example, where you start lying down and then, you you roll up and over. Those sort of flexion heavy moves were always hard for me. So I adapted that, and then I started to use it on clients, and I noticed also a huge difference in their core strength. Their necks weren't as tight. And so I think my philosophy, probably summarized, is using Pilates as a conduit to build functional strength. And doing so based on the science that's out there. Now, listen, if ab curls and things like that are working for somebody, I am not here to tell them to change anything about what they're doing. But I think a lot of times you see Pilates on social media, and these moves are so complicated that they're doing. It's like your leg is over here and you have to be in a curl up. And I think my motto is the simpler, the better. I find that the most effective exercises are usually the simplest ones. And I think, so I'm not here to tell anybody to stop doing that if that works for you. A lot of what clients ask me is like, if I'm not doing these ab curls, like, am I going to get abs? And I think you and I have discussed this previously. Abs, I think, are made in the kitchen. And
Totally.
So there's that. And then also I've seen studies that moves that kind of like stir the pot, for example, that activates the rectus, which is that six-pack muscle, just as much as something like an ab curl will. So anyway, I think in summation, like I said, my approach is more using Pilates to build that functional strength.
Yeah. So it's good. I mean, take like an eclectic kind of approach, taking some things from here, blending it as needed to fit whatever the client maybe would benefit the most from.
Yeah.
That's good. Because also too, like keeping seems like rigid in like one way of doing things. I know this is always the way we do it every single time. I've definitely found that's going to be not as applicable for everybody, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And listen, like I said, if doing ab curls like feels great for somebody, then that's fine. But I like to let people know if they're having trouble with that kind of stuff, there is another way to build core strength.
Yeah. I've always felt too, like, because we see people that are in pain, like that's our thing, right? Pain. If you're in pain, we're going to get the pain better.
Right.
Figure out why, what happened, right? Like what's going on? How can we fix it? And then how can we prevent it from coming back? And we do a lot of the similar things you're describing, you know, where oftentimes we find ourselves like with people in back pain, usually there's a couple mechanisms that like, what's the pain coming from, you know? We're working on core stability a bunch.
Yeah.
And the first step I usually say is like, can you get into this knee plank, stir the pot, roll out position with a neutral spine and have your back not hurt? And do a rollout where it's like, oh, my back just grabbed, right? That's just a spasm because things are in protection mode. So I'm like, all right, first step, can we just find your core without your back getting lit up? We could do a lot of manual therapy stuff first to get something up for success, right?
Yeah.
But we for sure later are going to be like translating that to functional movements. Yeah. Can you translate just core awareness and recruitment with functional movement stuff? And then the third step being layering and diaphragmatic breathing. Yeah. I'm like core stability ninjas, like to be a ninja, everything we always built on, but then can you layer in diaphragmatic breathing at the same time without holding your breath? Anyway, and then be like, hey, go now, let's take a step up a notch, you know? So that's cool. Just like I said, a lot of the blend, you know? What are some of the goals when people reach out to you, what are they usually saying they want?
So
6 packs?
Well, honestly,
which is okay. I mean, like, like everyone wants a good physique, right?
Right. So I think a lot of people come to me, especially women, even though Pilates, I don't just teach women, I teach men too. I think a lot of people's goals are aesthetic. Like, you know, I want to, you know, make this thinner, or I want a 6-pack, or, you know,
look good in a bathing suit.
Right. Yeah. And I really do struggle a little bit because some of these things you can't change necessarily. Like you can't change somebody's bone structure. You can't change genetic predispositions. So a lot of people do come to me with aesthetic goals. I think what I try to do with people is to reframe the mindset a little bit, because I do kind of see Pilates and exercise in general as kind of a conduit to longevity. Mm-hmm. So that's how I think about it. And so my personal goal, even though it's a little bit tough to convince people my age to think like this, somebody who's, you know, maybe a little older is a little more cognizant of this, but my personal goal with working out is to be as mobile and to be able to function as well as I do now as when I'm 80. So it's not aesthetic. It's just about living a pain-free life where, you know, we lose muscle over time, where I'm maintaining that muscle and I'm maintaining my mobility. And so that's kind of the mindset I do try to get clients in. Now, listen, obviously there are aesthetic benefits that come with Pilates, as there are with any consistent workout routine. Yeah. But I try not to make that the emphasis.
Yeah. I think consistency is always going to be the main theme that we talk to people about, you know?
Right.
All right. So 6 packs are made in the kitchen. Yeah. Totally agree. What do you convey to people for that?
For getting...
Yeah. It's like, all right, I want to look good. I want to look good in the bathing suit. I want to get a 6-pack. I want to be my physique to be better. Like, all right, let's reframe that. Functionality over time, longevity, totally. Yeah. Cool. I also, though, want to look good. How can I capitalize on this?
Yeah. So, I mean, listen, this is an interesting question. I'm very much in this sort of wellness mindset myself. You know, I try to take a balanced approach with clients, though, because listen, you know, for me, I'm very careful about what I eat. I don't eat gluten or dairy. I don't drink alcohol. And I don't drink coffee just because of the acidity. And there are a lot of other things that I do that I know isn't necessarily applicable to somebody else. So, also, for example, I see a functional medicine doctor every 6 months who he's a real MD, which was important to me because my dad was the chief urology at Penn for 40 years. So
really?
I have a ton of respect for doctors in the medical world. Now, I can also hold that along with the knowledge that I think that there are some areas where Western medicine comes up short. And for me, with certain problems that I was facing, like gut health, hormonal imbalances, these doctors were amazing, but they were not giving me solutions that I viewed as long term. They wanted to put me on a medication. They wanted to put me on a pill. And listen, if that's necessary at any point, like if I have a bacterial infection,
sometimes you need penicillin.
I'm taking the medication.
Yeah, for sure.
But these were issues that were sort of persisting. So I wanted to find a long lasting sort of solution to them, which is why I started seeing this functional medicine doctor in Miami. His name is Christopher Estes. He's excellent. I would recommend him to anybody. And he does very in-depth blood work. And a bunch of other tests. And so I get those done every 6 months. Now, again, for some people, the lifestyle that I live and going that far, maybe for some people would consider it down the rabbit hole, could feel restrictive to them. So I'm cognizant that not everybody has like the same goals that I do. So in general, the things that I tell people are move every day. Whether it's a walk, whether it's a leisurely bike, whether it's a workout, get up and get moving. I believe that moving your body is the best medicine for anything, right? And then in terms of the food that you're nourishing yourself with, try to go for organic produce, pasture-raised meats, grass-fed pasture raised, I guess they sort of go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Wild caught seafood. And in general, try to eat like whole foods. If you're looking on the back of the package and you're seeing, if, for example, if it's a snack and it's like granola, there shouldn't be like sugar in there. You know what I mean? Like look for things that are oats, maybe some fruit, and then some seeds if you're looking for granola. Like I mentioned, I don't eat gluten, but if somebody's shopping for bread, I'll encourage them to go to a local bakery and buy some sourdough instead of going to the grocery store and buying bread that's most likely has wheat that's sprayed with glyphosate. So
do you make your own sourdough bread?
Well, I don't because I'm gluten-free. So, but I'm actually, I have to be gluten-free. It's not like
Is there an option to make sourdough gluten-free?
So technically, I think, and I'm not a bread expert, so if any of your listeners are bread makers, I apologize if I'm getting this wrong, but I think that sourdough naturally has less gluten than other bread because of like the fermentation process, but I do think there is still some gluten in there.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, cool. My wife has not gotten into the sourdough bread making phase yet.
Yeah, no, my husband loves sourdough, so I wish that I could do that. It feels like a lot of work. And that kind of goes to the point too, where like everybody's tolerance level for different things is different. Yeah. Like I'm perfectly content to go get my blood work at 6 a.m. in Miami for this doctor, but like sourdough seems like too much like, for me.
Whoa, that's way too much work. You kidding me? Like, yeah. Oh my gosh, that's funny. Interesting. I mean, I totally agree. Like, I think some things that I've heard, right? Moderation is always going to be important too. And the things we consume, I think, are going to be the most influential for like our impact of our health and longevity.
Right.
And then agreed totally, like body physique and body composition is going to ultimately come down to like what we're consuming, you know?
Right.
That is my opinion. Where if someone doesn't even exercise and they start changing what their nutrition intake looks like, even just usually portion control is just like the first step.
For sure.
And then it's like, let's just not eat this and not eat that, but let's, you know, like snacks and like, you know, highly processed things.
Yeah. I mean, listen, anecdotally, and I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nutritionist, but I do see, you know, I'm 29. I see a lot of my friends with all of these weird diseases. Like one of my friends just had to get her thyroid removed and she's 29.
Really? Wow.
So, you know, and my friends are having fertility issues and things like that. Just stuff that is so odd. And the only thing that I can really attribute that to that's changed is like environmental toxins and a more polluted, problematic food supply.
Yeah.
So
I don't disagree with you.
you know, again, it's just what I'm observing around me. And, you know, in terms of what an individual wants to do with that knowledge, I leave that up to them. For me, that means major lifestyle modifications. Like I have a whole house water filter on my house.
That's one of my goals.
My husband would tell him I probably drive him nuts with all this stuff. Like I just got these air purifiers called like Jasper air purifiers, and I cook a lot. So I know that some people don't like to cook, but I like knowing what's in my food. I like knowing that, you know, my seafood is wild caught, the potatoes I'm making are organic. And when I cook at home, you would be so surprised as to how bad the air quality is, because this air purifier is a smart air purifier. So it gears up when it senses more pollution in the air, and it goes crazy when I cook. So just those little things, those little changes. One thing that's I think especially prevalent in Florida is like mold toxicity. That was honestly part of my problem and why I went to see this functional medicine doctor, because I was having, and I think you guys do, like vestibular therapy.
Yeah.
I was having vestibular problems, and like I had every scan known to man and they could find nothing wrong. I did a balance test, which is horrible. I mean, at all costs, anybody should avoid doing that. And I had high levels of mold in my system.
Interesting. How did you find that out? Like what?
So
blood work?
So that one's not blood work. That one's another type of test. It's like it's a urine test.
Okay.
That he does. And there are like a lot of specific things. There's something that you have to take that's sort of like a detox supplement beforehand. And then, it's collected over like, I think half a day. And then you have to send it back to a lab. And so anyway, he put me on a bunch of I take a lot of supplements a day, like probably like 18.
18 supplements a day.
Yeah.
Which ones? Prescribed by this guy?
Yes. Yeah. So they're not all prescription though. I mean, there's stuff that
or like recommended by this guy. I should say.
Yeah. There's stuff that you can find in some cases in a grocery store, but like B vitamins, D vitamins, phosphatidylcholine, that was more for like the neurological symptoms that I was having with the mold. Oregano, I'm trying to think what else. There's he makes me take a core mineral supplement. There are certain detox supplements that I have to take a certain time away from food that are it's charcoal, glucomannan, and something else.
Interesting.
So a lot of different stuff.
What other neurological, besides vestibular, any other neurological symptoms?
No, so I was just getting, it wasn't true vertigo. It was the sensation where I was like on a boat almost.
Swaying?
Yeah. And like I said, they really couldn't attribute it to anything. And honestly, it was weird. The only time when I didn't have it is when I was doing something active like Pilates or walking. I would only have it or notice it when I was sitting still.
Interesting. Yeah. Since then, improvements?
Yeah, massive. I don't have it anymore.
Interesting. How quickly did you notice improvements after diving into that?
Probably a year, and I would say that's probably the other thing that I think people have to keep in mind. This stuff doesn't work like that.
Yeah, yeah.
you have to keep at it and be consistent. It's not, for me, I don't look at it as something that's temporary. Like my mindset is I'm probably going to be on some supplement routine for the rest of my life. And sometimes when you fix one thing, another thing pops up. And just like with exercise, there are progressions and regressions,
Yeah.
And
It's like fluid state.
right. And
Yeah.
I think that's how I look at health as well.
Yeah. Which is a good look, because I would totally agree with you. It's like, nope, this didn't work. Don't see anything, and then bail.
Yeah.
Fitness, exercise, physical therapy, pain relief, like stuff, working on stuff, But I think another thing I like that too, of like, there's regressions and progressions phases of just general, where sometimes things just hurt for a little bit and then they'll regress and be okay. And then you're just in pain right now, right? We can get it better. It's going to get better. There's no reason why you can't, versus like, oh no, I'm doomed, forever. I'm going to have this back pain or knee pain or whatever.
Right. I feel like people are hard on themselves when it comes to exercise. I mean, me included, like from horseback riding, I have bad knees, and like my right knee specifically gives me a little more trouble because my right inner thigh is like, it has a tendency to, like, that adductor like tenses up a little bit. And so that bothers my knee sometimes when I do things like squats or whatever. And so, but there's sometimes it doesn't bother me at all. So when it does, I have the tendency in my mind to get like a little discouraged, but I do the things that I know that I should be doing, like, stretching it after a workout and things like that. And it usually it subsides.
Yeah.
I try to look at everything as a fluid state.
For sure. I literally just did a podcast, or I posted a little while ago, about like athlete pain management, active people pain management, where it's like, would you expect a pro athlete, as an example, to like never have any kind of banged up or nicked up? And of course they do.
Yeah.
They just like back it up a little bit and they manage it.
Right.
Just so the roller coaster isn't like a wild up and down, but more so just managed.
And I think that makes you appreciate more the times when you are operating at 110%. Sort of those little steps back allow you to take more steps forward. That's how I try to
I would agree. I love that. I totally agree with that. Makes you appreciate good times.
Right.
I would also put in that people are hard on themselves, and including myself. I fall in this boat, but just the comparison game.
Yeah.
On social media.
Right. And so
I hear these influencers like incredible shape.
Yeah.
They're living the best life ever. I'm like, well, you also don't know what's going on. But what else do they have going on in their life?
Yeah.
Do they actually have kids?
Right.
Do they have like a job? That's all they do, and they're like early 20s and like,
right.
Must be hard,
Well, I think that's a huge thing with Pilates too, because even though, like I say, I do train men and women, I think it is sort of female focused because it's gotten this reputation, as I sort of mentioned in the beginning of the podcast, for being like this elongating, lengthening workout. And so you see these moves on social media, and even me as an instructor, I get overwhelmed. I'm like, how does that person do that? I could never. And sometimes I think maybe what you don't realize is that they're probably doing one of those moves. You know what I mean? They're not doing them in a set of 10.
Yeah.
And I think there's this tendency, again, to make these moves very complicated so clients maybe don't get bored.
Make it look fancy.
Yeah. But I look at the form on these people, and, when they're doing kickbacks or something, they're arching their back, they're flaring their rib cage, they're rotating their pelvis one way. And it's like, that's great.
It's not ideal.
Yeah. It's great that, it looks good for you, but like, talk to me in 6 hours.
Or 6 months of continuing doing the same thing over and over again. You mentioned, equestrian life.
Yeah.
Back. He's giving us trouble, neck, stiffness, knee issues and stuff. We actually see a lot of equestrians. I mean, this area is so dense, especially in Wellington.
Yeah.
How long were you doing equestrian?
14 years.
Ooh,
yeah.
That's a good amount of time.
Yeah. Since I was very young. And I loved it. I love the horses. I think it makes you very independent. It makes you mature very quickly, kind of teaches you to be very hardworking. And honestly, it teaches you to be humble because, listen, you can have the best day in the world, but horses can't talk to you. Maybe the horse has a stomach ache. maybe his foot's not feeling great,
Yeah.
And so it takes both you and the horse to be having a great day.
For things to line up.
Yep.
Yeah.
Everything has to line up. And these horses are treated like people. Like my horses had chiropractors.
Yeah.
um, you know, so it's a great sport, and I'm glad that I was involved in it. But it certainly, took its toll on my body.
If let's say you had when you were training equestrian life, like, hey, we're gonna dabble in some Pilates stuff.
Yeah.
That's gonna help you be a better rider or manage stability. Do you think that'd been pretty impactful for you?
I think it definitely would have been helpful. Now, I mean, listen, you train professional athletes, so I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here. But if you're doing a sport that encourages movements that aren't necessarily functional, right? Like, horseback riders, they tend to be very quad dominant from like the positioning on the horse. Obviously when you're with somebody, you can work on training their glutes to make that a little more balanced, but that doesn't change that at the end of the day, they're still going to be riding horses for probably 6 hours a day.
Right.
Or, like for golf, like you can teach somebody to like rotate maybe more with their hips instead of their low back, but they're still going to be doing that rotation over and over and over again. So there's going to be one side that's stronger, one side that's weaker. So I think while it probably would have helped me manage symptoms and be more aware of my body, I think there still would have been things that I had to manage with it.
Just innate risk, innate difficulty.
Yeah, like another example, when you're jumping over a jump, you don't want to look down, right? But technically looking down is the only way that your neck remains kind of in line with your spine. Like it would be like somebody looking at themselves in the mirror while they did a squat, down, and then they're looking at themselves, their chin kind of protrudes, their neck is cocked back. And so when you're riding, you're doing that over and over and over again. So there's certain things like that obviously when you're working out, you can train certain things to counteract that so you don't go through your everyday life like that. But again, you're still going to be doing that movement.
Yeah. Back to your practice.
Yeah.
Is there a client or a group of clients that you've worked with that you feel like have made huge strides? Like any case scenarios?
Yeah. I mean, I have clients from kind of across the age, gender spectrum. I think universally, a lot of people will come to me, especially if they've been doing Pilates and they're like a little hypermobile. Like, again, I find they're really not able to properly like brace their core. And these are people that like do things in their everyday life, like, like one girl loves to cycle, right? She loves Soul Cycle. And I'm like, okay, that's great. Like in my mind, I'm like, well, this isn't maybe necessarily what you should be doing, but she loves it. So I'm not going to tell her not to do that. But with her, for example, we've worked on a lot of like glute strengthening, a lot of core bracing. And, she feels better. Like her low back was really hurting her. So she thought that, maybe she needed to practice like more mobility with her low back, where I was like, well, I don't think that's the case, but let's check your hamstrings, see if they're tight. And that ended up being the problem. Her hamstrings were just so tight. So we worked on, again, like posterior chain strengthening. So like glutes, hamstrings. And then at the end, I'd always make sure to do like a static stretch with her. But there's so many like stories I have from clients. I train an 83-year-old, and for him, like success looks different than it does for that client that I just explained.
Yeah.
So, everybody's different. And I think everybody has sort of their own respective wins that, are wins for them, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, right. No, specific per person
Yeah.
and what their goals are and their values and stuff. And
Right.
also the current walk of life, you know.
Right.
There's a lot of things that can yield overall health, wellness, and improvement and stuff.
Yeah.
This particular client you're talking about, she liked us to spin a lot, right?
Yeah.
Cool. I mean, cardiovascular exercise is always going to be helpful.
Yeah, for sure.
I would imagine usually what we've found too, the posture you were talking about with like equestrians, right? They're bent over and then their neck's extended.
Yep.
And then they sit at their desk all day and they're working, right? And then they go exercise by doing a spin class and they're in the same position, maybe even a bit more extended in their neck.
Yeah.
Or like hunched over and their neck's looking up, you know? Anyway, what are your suggestions on that of like overall health and wellness? What does a game plan look like for somebody in your eyes?
It depends who the person is, as you were just saying.
Let's say this lady.
You know, for me, I would say, you know, getting her to move more that's not cycling, just like encouraging walks and things like that, working on mobility, but not necessarily in the spine, but like the hips and the shoulders, so you can like properly kind of retract your shoulders when it's necessary.
Posture for sure.
Yeah, posture is a huge one. And sort of like a neutral, like I was saying before, a little more like a neutral spine, because I know like my husband loves the Peloton, but I walk in and I look at him on the Peloton and he's crunched over like this, you know, as you know, he has back problems and his spine is rounded. And I'm like, this is not what you should be doing.
Not ideal.
But you know, even for this like 83-year-old that I train, like he loves golf, you know, and I'm not gonna tell him not to golf, even though, you know, like I'm sure I can just see him like standing over the golf ball and his like, you know, spine is curved. He's not bracing his core. And he has some issues with his hips. So obviously it's not like the best thing, but I always just try to like control the symptoms, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Well, I would imagine for that guy, because I see people like that.
I'm sure, yeah.
We're trying to convey like, I guess what you're saying, like of these things should translate to your golf game.
Yes, exactly. And that's kind of the philosophy that I try to hold with everything, and which is why I like doing the privates and being one-on-one with people, because, you know, obviously the principles are similar, but what I'm teaching like that 83-year-old is different than from what I'm teaching, you know, the girl who loves Soul Cycle, you know, because they're, you know, they have similar kind of, maybe if you were looking at them just in like without any sort of like identity, like maybe some of the exercises would translate from one to the other. But I target their sessions to things that are going to help them in their everyday life, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, again, going back to the social media point, a lot of those moves are complicated, but what are you doing that reflects those moves in your everyday life? And for me, when I'm drawing on traditional Pilates moves and maybe modifying them a little bit, my thought is like, okay, what position are you in your everyday life that reflects this? And what is this going to help you with? And if I don't have an answer to one of those things, I'm like, okay, this is maybe not like the best use of time in a session.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, what, you know, functionality translated over to be purposeful.
Yeah.
All super interesting.
Yeah.
If people want to reach out to you, what's the best way they can reach out?
So I have a website, House of Pilates, WPB, which stands for West Palm Beach. And I have a contact form on there. As I mentioned, my studio is out of my guest house. So I take contact kind of forms for people who want to sign up with me. A lot of my business is word of mouth, but I do take in, you know, people that I don't know it all, but I have a conversation with them first and, find out what specifically they want to address. And so that's how people reach out to me, either there or I'm on Instagram at House of Pilates, West Palm Beach. So,
Cool. So website, Instagram.
yep.
Cool. Well, thanks for coming on
Yeah.
and sharing some knowledge and stuff like that. And if y'all have any questions or comments, questions, concerns, suggestions, we're always open to ideas. Don't hesitate to reach out to Nolan for all your Pilates inquiries and needs and stuff. And don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have any pain that you want to fix too. And we'll have to get you on again. And
Yeah,
dive
this
into
was
more stuff. 'Cause
that's
I'm going to come next week to your place
yeah.
for like a one-on-one
Yeah.
intense session.
I'm excited.
See how I do.
Which is going to be great. And a little shout out to Kyle here. He helped my husband with his low back pain. And now he's golfing and playing tennis like a pro. So definitely what you're doing is amazing.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm glad he's getting back to his thing. That's good. Because it was hard to see him like that.
Yeah.
I could see it was definitely affecting him,
Yes,
emotionally.
And he is very athletic, so he's not used to like being taken down often. And, but you fixed him right up.
Well, I appreciate that. No, thank you. I'm glad he's doing so much better. And again, reach out if you have any questions, and we'll catch y'all next time.
Awesome.